Hey you guys, welcome to the workshop, and we're starting, right on time at 5 p.m. in London, I think. This is Yueyang, and I am your what's the name? Workshop manager for this year. I am a third year economics student, and I've been playing jazz piano, also classical piano for a while. I'm very excited to have this workshop with you. It's gonna be little different than the previous workshop we have with Jamie Baker, which is also a very brilliant saxophonist and also workshop manager. And I hope I can, be as good as him for this year's workshop. So that's kind of a very short intro to the workshop. I have a certain idea for this year's workshop since it's going to be online, especially in term one. So it's going to be more of an informative workshop otherwise it will be like less possible to like play together in the same room with all the rules about the people limitations and stuff. So since this is more of an informative workshop, I've prepared some transcriptions, some practices, also some jazz notes for you guys to use. You can find the notes for today's workshop in the description. I think there's a Google Doc link in the descriptions for the workshop notes today. Okay. So first things first. Since this is a jazz workshop, we should probably talk about what does a jazz consist of? What makes something sounds like a jazz thing? So before that, if you don't have any knowledge about jazz, it's totally okay because I'm gonna cover every single little things, like major, minor, 2-5-1, and all those kind of jazzy stuff. Like you don't need to worry about that. Or if you know like jazz things and you may find this like a little slow or boring, please do let me know. Like what interests you? Like what do you want to know about jazz other than playing the 2-5-1, playing a major sound, or just going through some standards together. Okay, so let's get back to the jazz sound. Okay, so the first things I would think about the jazz sounds would be maybe a seventh chord, because this is like the most commonly used things in jazz, but that doesn't necessarily consist of the sound of jazz, because pop music use it, R&B music use it, neo soul music use them. For example, in a song called Best Part by her and Daniel Caesar, use a lot of seventh chord. For example, like this. They're all example of seventh chord, and this is kind of a pop tune, but it doesn't necessarily has a jazz sound. It just has a more sophisticated and what's the word? Yeah, just sophisticated sounds that normally than like certain triads. So a seventh chord doesn't necessarily capture the sound of jazz. Also, Robert Glasper used seventh chord a lot, but not in a jazz tune, more like an R&B tune. For example, his tune called So Beautiful. These are all seventh chord and maybe one or two sus chord. So seventh chord doesn't necessarily make a jazz sound. Just it sounds nice in any kind of music. Even Chopin uses it in his like classical compositions. Debussy used them. So probably not a good place to start. Also, people may say extension makes a chord sound jazzier. For example, 9th, 11th, 13th. So if you don't know anything about jazz, you may wonder what is the 9th, what is the 11th, what is the 13th. You don't have to worry about that because we're gonna like slowly explore this area of dominant stuff, major and minor stuff. Okay. Before we go straight into the first topic of today's workshop, I have a little framework here for like the next 4 or 5 workshops. Basically, I'm gonna sum up all of the jazz things in three kind of categories: major, melodic, minor, and diminish. And this is a good way to organize your theory and your playing for jazz standards, or even write your own jazz tunes, jazz arrangement for our lovely big band or small band, or even just play at the very awesome jam. So also later I'm gonna cover some reharmonization stuff, which will make you sounds extremely cool, but also like in the context of standards. This is a quick example. Basically just harmonize every single note you're playing. If you're a horn player, a saxophone player, it's also important to know that stuff, because it will be useful for you to improvise on, since you know the chords, know the chord melody, and also know which scales to play on over certain standards. Okay, so let's get straight into it. Okay, wait. So, for today, I have chosen a very awesome standard that I have played like 5 minutes ago. It's called On Green Dolphin Street. It's normally not a very good choice for like a start for a jazz tune and stuff, but this is something that really match what I'm gonna talk about today, which is very easy. It's the major and the major 251. Luckily, the Green Dolphin Street has tons of major and minor and 251. We can explore it. We don't necessarily have to know the melody by now. We just need to know like what is a 251 and what is a major. So first things first, C major, for example. C major is consists of 7 notes, or 8 actually. Is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. There's 8 notes, and according to the church modes, there's 7 different church modes, which are Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. It's a lot of modes, but we don't have to know all of them at the moment. All we now have to focus is the C Ionian, which is the first one. The second one, D Dorian, and the F Lydian one, or probably the G Mixolydian. So 4 modes. You might wonder, why do we need modes to understand a major scale? Can we just play a major scale in a major chords? So the reason why we use a church mode is that different church modes can help us to connect the progressions and understand like how to modulate between different keys, what scales to play on. So it won't hurt you to learn the major 7 major modes. 7 church mode in a major scale. So C major. The reason why I choose C major, because it's obviously on a piano, it's all white keys. For a saxophone player, it doesn't really matter if you're an E flat or a B flat key instrument. Talking about C major is just gonna be the most accessible and the most easy to understand. So let's start with C Ionian. So C Ionian is the most basic major scale. Yeah, it starts at 1 being C, and 2 1, and in between you have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, and that's how jazz musicians will count their notes in the scale. Probably you can see that I've written 9th, 11th, and 13th in the Ionian mode. That's because that's how we commonly describe like the extension of the chord. For example, if I want to play a C major 9, so it will be C major 9 will consist of a C major 7, C major 7 being C, the 1, 3, the 5th, and the 7th. Then the C major 9 would be a 9th, which is D on the top. So it is a very good idea to remember all of your 9th, 11th, and 13th. But you do need some tricks to remember them if you're not that familiar with your major scale or minor scale. But don't worry, there's a very quick way to remember it. So for 9th, you can think of the second note in the major scale as 9. So the 2 is 9, the 4 would be 11th, and the 6 would be 13th. So in this case, it will be D, F, A. So in every major scale, or even minor scales, actually in even a like mixolydian scale, dominant scales, diminish, you can always find that the 9th, 11th, and 13th would always be your 2, 4, and 6. And interestingly, this 2, 4, and 6 note actually consists of, make a minor chord, minor triad. And that will bring us to Dorian mode, which is the second mode in C major scale. So it start on D and end on D. And basically it is just a scale that start in a C major scale, but start on a D. Okay. Why this is very important. The reason why this is very important is that D major scale, D Dorian scale is also is where we have our minor 7th chord. And also, same as the C major 7, it also consists of 1, 3, 5, and 7 in. So the context is in D Dorian. So the 1 would be D, F, A, and then a C. This will be our minor 7th chord. So this is the C major chord, C, E, G, B. Yeah. So make sure you just get all of those major 7th sound for whatever instrument you're playing on. If you're playing like a lead instrument, just try to play it in arpeggios, or maybe different combinations. Any way you want, as long as you can remember them. Okay. So why we're having like so much focus on the Dorian is that it's not only the second mode of C major scale, not only consists of the minor 7th chord, but also this kind of give us an implication of major and minor doesn't have to be separated. So if you remember a major scale, then you will automatically know a minor scale. So there's no point in categorizing minor, major, melodic minor, diminish. Like you just only have like a major sound, diminish, and then whatever the rest of the things are. Okay, so let's pick another key that we can try to experiment with this idea. So for example, I'm in the key of F. So a F major would be F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. So the Dorian mode in F major will start on G. So it will be, in this case we will have the D minor 7 from a C major scale. Yep. want to find a minor, how to play a minor scale, you can just like reverse engineer this kind of thought. So for example, I want to play an A minor, A minor 7. So what would be the Ionian, what will be the Ionian scale? What will be the major scale that has a minor? So A minor being the second mode, so it will be the second note in the scale. So the first note would be a G. So you're gonna play a G major scale, and then you can find your A minor 7. Also, you can find your A minor scale as well, but this is just one of the minor scale. But it doesn't matter. This is a very simple way to remember it, and also like a very quick way to navigate around the lead sheet. It will be a good example if I can put it in on Green Dolphin Street. So the Green Dolphin Street in my lead sheet here, it starts on the E flat. E flat. So the first chord you can see here, E flat major 7. Major 7 has a little triangle down here, so a triangle means 7. And you can see an E flat minor 7 here. A little like line implies that this is a minor chord. It's like minus. That's how I remember it. So please don't judge. So the first two chords would be E flat major and E flat minor 7. The thing in the middle just tells us that we're just going to play the same chord on the second bar, the same chord on the fourth bar. So if we can find our E flat major 7, E flat major scale, we will be able to play like improvise a little bit on this E flat major 7. This is a very diatonic way to improvise, especially in the jazz. It's not a bad thing, and the reason why I don't start on a blues scales is that like blues scale is an interesting tool that you can use, but it's not for every circumstances. You just cannot put blues scales everywhere in every bar for every chord. So it's important to know major, melodic minor, and diminished, which we'll be covering for like the rest of the workshop. Okay, so E flat major is the very easy one, but if we want to find an E flat minor scale, then we would think this E minor 7 being the chord for E flat Dorian. So what will be the first note that has an E flat Dorian in it? So it will be a D flat. So we're gonna play a D flat major. D flat major, which will give us the E flat Dorian. Then we have our minor sounds. So it still sounds very diatonic because we're just playing the scale straight from what we have been told by the chords. This is a very good place to start, especially when you're playing a major chord or a minor chord. But we'll get to the rest of the stuff, and just don't worry about that if you don't know anything about like all those signs under there. We'll cover it in like for later. Okay. So we're gonna skip the third one, the Phrygian. We're gonna just do Lydian first, because Lydian, it's a very great sound. It's probably the brightest sound you can get from a major scale, and it's also very easy to remember. So in a C major scale, the fourth mode will be Lydian. So what is the note in a fourth note in the C major? It will be an F. So you just play C major, start with F. So this is super bright sound. But if you want to put it in the context of C, so you have to think of which scale has C as the fourth note. Then it will be I don't know. It will be a G. It will be a G major. Okay, so you have an F sharp in a G major scale. So when you play a C Lydian from a G major, it will sound like this. Yeah, it's super bright with this F sharp, the sharp 4. Also, sharp 4 can be interpreted as a sharp 11 because, as I said before, 4 is also the 11th. So this will be a sharp 11 in the C major, but we don't usually call that. So we just call it C major Lydian, or just C Lydian. Okay. And the final one we're going to cover is the G mixolydian. Kind of an important one as well, because this is where we get our dominant voicings. So it starts on the 5th note in a C major, in any scale actually, the mixolydian mode. There's a lot of clash in between a C major 7 and a G mixolydian, because G mixolydian is a dominant chord. A dominant chord also consists of 1, 3, 5, 7, same as major 7, minor 7. So it will be 1 as G, 3 as B, 5 as D, and the 7th as F natural. So not a G major sound. It's a F natural in the context of C major. So basically, anything you play in this 7 note actually, 7 different note will definitely be in like diatonic to the C major. Any combinations in your solo, it will be just in this 7 note. Any combination will just have the sound of a C major, if you want it to be, and it's also highly dependent on what the bass player will play. But if you want to play a C major, like diatonically, this would be your best options. Okay, so that's enough of the boring church mode stuff. Let's get to some good stuff. Okay, this is some good way to remember what I've just said. Is minor is included in the major scale, which is the 2nd mode, Dorian mode. Lydian has a sharp 4. So anytime you play a scale, the 4th note will be sharp. That is like a half step up. So you'll get your Lydian sound. Dominant 7 is the 5th mode. This is very important because later we will talk about 2-5-1, and dominant 7 is a very important part of a 2-5-1 progressions. Okay. Before we move on, I have a little exercise for you that can help you to improve your major scales, and not only just practicing like one run, but actually play it so that you can cover every single mode in the major scale. So for example, it would be like if you are a horn player or a saxophone player, just keep doing it as fast as you can. Go through 12 keys, and this would be, you can solve all of your confusions about major modes. But also try to think of which mode it is when you're playing through it, not just like playing how fast you can. But also for a keyboard player, you definitely need to do both hand. For organ player, I have no idea, because the foot pedal, I don't know if you can do it in a very fast way, but if you can, try to do it both your hands and your feet as well. So for a vocalist, it's also very good practice to sing every single mode, because this help you to get also help to improve correct pitch and stuff, and also know what notes you're gonna improvise on when you're scatting on a major or minor chord. So far we only have a major and minor chord. So let's move on to our very famous 2-5-1 progressions. Okay. So a 2-5-1 progressions actually refers to the bass note, the movement of the bass note, which is the 2 in a major scale, the 5 in a major scale, and the 1 in a major scale. That is the major 2-5-1 progression. So in the context of C, it will be D, G, C. So it might not be that obvious for a horn player, because you cannot play. Maybe you cannot play keyboards, but I don't know. Many people can play the keyboard, so it's not. Yeah, just try to listen to a 2-5-1 sound. It probably sounds like this. Okay, this actually makes a very, very jazzy sound. You probably hear it in a pop tune, but it's not gonna be sounds like this. This is all the sound of a 2-5-1. This is the sound of 2-5-1 in C major. So, like, this is a bunch of big chords, but we're not gonna do that now. So, let's just break it down a little bit. 2-5-1, 2 is a minor 7th chord. So, as we know, the 2 is also the Dorian mode. So the D minor 7 would be our 2 chord. This is pretty straightforward. And 5 is our mixed lydian mode, and that gives us a dominant 7th chord, which is a G7. If you see on the lead sheet that has a G and a 7, or any letter with just a 7 next to it, it is definitely a dominant chord. So you can see it on the right. C7. Yep, C7 here. This is a dominant chord, and try to not to get confused between the line in the middle, also the triangle stuff. Okay. So the final one is the major chord, which is the 1. So it's our Ionian mode. Very straightforward. It's a C major 7. It can also be a C major with tons of extension, but that's for later. And also, like, that's some other stuff to improvise on. But for the moment, we're just gonna do a C major 7. So this is a very diatonic 2-5-1 sound. And you can also play, and also depends on the lead player what like the solo, the line of the solo. So it really depends on the context you're playing. But it's the safest way to do a 2-5-1 in a diatonic options, which is D minor, G mixed lydian, and C major 7. Okay. So since we got this progression sorted out, we can start to work on how to improvise over the most iconic jazz progressions. And the most obvious way is that we're just going to play a C major scale over the entire 3 progressions, regardless of what's happening in the middle. And this is technically correct, because the entire 2-5-1 C major 2-5-1 is in C major. So If there's a time that you just got panicked, don't know what to play, just look at the one chord. If it's a C major 7 or a C major added something, then you just play a C major scale. It won't hurt you, and it might not sound as good, but it's definitely not wrong. Also, if you're in the key of F, a 2/5 would be G, C, F. Yeah. So just try to get the hang of it, and then know your 2/5/1 stuff as quick as you can, and identify them on the lead sheet as quick as you can, because at a jam, or you're trying to go to a gig, you might not have many time to prepare for your solo. You might not have the time to write a solo for yourself. So it's important to know where is the 2/5/1, so you can know where you can just put your solo stuff on. Okay. But if you want to break this 2/5/1 into 3 pieces and improvise on every single pieces, this is also possible. And like I've given a very small example here. For D7 in a C major 2/5/1, you can just play a D Dorian C major sound. So it will be sounds like this. This is the sound of a D Dorian from C major for the 2 chord. And this is not the most complicated one. Actually, many jazz musicians just try to ignore this 2 chord because there aren't actually many things that you can do. But for the dominant chord, it is very, very, very different. There's so many things going on the 5 chord, being the dominant 7 chord, and a lot of soloists, they just replace the 2 chord with the 5 chord, and they just like, it's not wrong because it is still in a C major 2/5/1. It will just make your solo way more interesting and more stuff to play on. Okay, but for now we're just gonna do G dominant 7 on G dominant 7. So the first option we have is the G mixolydian mode from C major. So it will be the 5th, start on the 5th of the C, which is G. Actually, just every single note in the C major scale, but you still remember it as a G7, G mixolydian, it's okay. But you can also just remember it as a C major scale, because this is the most obvious one to improvise on. And the second one I wrote is a G diminished. We're not gonna cover it today. Also the G sus13, that is for later. And A flat, D melodic minor, D flat pentatonic. There are all options that you can play on a G dominant 7 chord. But for today, we're not gonna cover it. We're just gonna focus on a G7, like the most basic major 2/5/1 stuff. So this is just a list that you can do, just to explain how like the possibility on the dominant chord is. And for the final major scale, this is a little bit more interesting because you can get a very, very bright sound from a C major 7 by going up a 5th, but they are still in the correct way, like in the correct way to play a solo on C major 7. For example, C up a 5th would be a G. So it will be, you'll find out that you have a G major scale playing on a C major chord. So this actually make this G major scale a C major Lydian because it has a sharp 4. So this is a very good way to play around in the, like maybe in a vamp. You're just gonna fix on a C major 7, and they just go on and on and on. You just get bored playing the diatonic stuff. Maybe a Lydian sound, which will save you. Also for the ending of a tune, you can also, the saxophonist or whoever is playing the lead can end it with a sharp 4, which has a very mystic but very, very bright sound. So this is not the brightest sound you can get. the more you go up a fifth, the sound is gonna be a lot brighter. So going up a fifth from G will be D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're gonna play a D major scale over a C major. So noted that a D major scale being the fifth of a G major, this is actually a G major Lydian as well. So it is like brighter and then brighter again. It's gonna be sound like this. It's super bright, and it sounds like you're playing outside of the key, but actually you're not, just playing a lot brighter. Just remember, just don't abuse like a sharp 4 things in your for entire tune, because it's gonna be you're gonna have a hard time like keeping the attention of the audience, because this is a good surprise but not a good meal. Okay, this is pretty much a very basic overview of major 251. Well, we can go back to G7 for a bit and explain how we handled extension. You can see from the lead sheet on the right. For example, we have let's see, can have here. Okay, there's a D7 flat 9. So in jazz, there's so many kinds of extension that you can use. They're all based on 9th, 11th, 13th, like mostly. You can have a flat 9, for example, on G major 7 here. I'm sorry, G dominant 7 here. A flat 9, first a 9 would be an A. A flat 9 will be an A flat. Like, remember how I said that you can just quickly find the 9th, 11th, and 13th by just thinking about 2, 4, 6, which makes the minor triads. So for G7, if you go a half step up, you have A, and what is the A minor triad? It will be A, C, E. There you have your 9th, 11th, 13th. If you have a keyboard or like a little mini keyboard, you can just experiment on it. Or if you're playing a trumpet or a flute or other lead instrument, you can try to play around with the minor triad, and then giving it half step up, half step down. See how the sound you like. Especially when you're playing over a backing track. You can find it on YouTube or iReal Pro, which is a very awesome app. If you don't have it, just don't worry. You can just find tons of backing track on YouTube. I think most of the standards you need to play is actually have a backing track on YouTube. So let's go back to this G dominant 7. So a G dominant 7 flat 9 would be an A flat, because the 9 is an A. So most of the time, if you want to resolve to C major 7, like to the 1 major chord, it's important to lead your voice onto it. And this is very important for bass player. Definitely not important for drum player, but bass player, saxophone, or lead instrument player, and piano comping. Voice leading is a very important part. You have to think of your voice leading as if there is no comping, and you have to outline the entire harmonic progressions just by your solo, by your playing. Outline the progressions, like that is the most obvious way to highlight them, but there's also tons of ways to do it, and I'm gonna give you some example for the lick. Okay, let's just jump straight into the lick. Yeah. Okay. So the first lick I have for today's workshop is a very classic jazz lick that I have no idea where it came from. I've heard it so many times. It's definitely not this one. Oh, I almost forgot it. It's definitely not this one, because that is just way too simple for you guys. Even though you don't have, even though you can have no knowledge about jazz, this is still too easy. And it's overplayed. You can use it, but let's get to some more juicy stuff on the lick. Okay, I'm gonna play through this lick, and this is also in a C major 251. Yep. I can change to a piano sound. Yep. This is a very diatonic, warm 251 lick that has been used. I have no idea where it came from. But I still do have it in my mind. If you want to hear it with a walking bass, it will sound like this. Yep. So let's break this down a little bit so you can get a hang of how to write your own like solo 251 solo line. So the first part, this is actually a D minor triad, D minor 7 triad, no, D minor triad. So very diatonic. You just use the D Dorian from C major, or straight up you can just say I'm using C major on a D7, D minor 7. Okay, the second part is a little bit tricky, because in jazz we usually anticipate what the next chord will be, especially in a solo. So this part is actually an anticipation for the G dominant 7th chord. So this. So if you pay attention to how I analyze the 9th, 11th, and 13th, this D flat, or you can say C sharp, would be our minor triad with a D flat. That being said, this is sharp 4. That it will be a sharp 11 for the G's dominant 7. This is one of the extension you can play on a dominant chord, a sharp 11, and this is like creates tension when you use a flat 9th, flat 13, sharp 11. You always create tension. If I play it with a flat 9, even if you don't play 2 notes together, like a saxophonist, you still have tons of tension. Just in your little line, it's gonna be way more tension than just play a very diatonic G dominant 7. Yeah, and it's actually very important to add it to your solo, because that's where's the spice coming from, especially those chords. There's just a bunch of tensions. Actually, you can just smash the keyboard, and there are also a lot of tension, because they're all, if you want to analyze them, they can all be flat 9, flat 13, sharp 11 of something. Yeah, I'm not gonna do that. So let's get back to this little thing. So as I said, this is anticipation for G7 using this is a sharp 11 and this B flat. Remember this minor triad? This will be a sharp 9. Okay, so the first part of the lick start on the 5th of a D minor, so it will be an 8. Yeah. then it will be so this is just a little chromatic run to a C major. This line is absolutely beautiful if for any kinds of instrument. Also for like vocalists, you want to scat in a solo, then this is probably one of your go-to line. And this kind of like a classical jazz sound. Definitely not the sound of like modern jazz, or more the sound of Miles Davis or Stucky Puppy. Just this is not the line you play on those kind of stuff. But for like old school jazz standards, this is very old. This is very old. Okay, so as we can see, we have a lot of 2/5 progressions here on the right. Yeah, let's take a look at the last 4 bars on Green Dolphin Street. So we have a G minor 7, a C dominant 7. So this actually is a 2/5 of an F major. But in here you just play a 2/5. And then the next 2 is an F and a B flat. Also a 2/5 because you can see this 2 is a 2 from E major. So the whole thing, F, B flat, E flat, is an E flat major 2/5/1, same as what we have done before. D, G, C 2/5/1, major 2/5/1. Okay, so this is gonna be all over the jazz standards, like Fly Me to the Moon, all those stuff. This is like the most important progression you'll ever see in those old school jazz standards. Definitely not for those other stuff. Okay, so if we want to apply this lick to this very quick 2/5-2/5/1 progression, it's possible, but you're gonna be a little rushed because on Green Dolphin Street it's a pretty fast tune. So you can just play around with this lick. You don't have to play all the notes in the lick. I have written a variation of this lick down here. Yeah. So this is exactly the progression I've written out. Okay. So it's kind of similar to, but without the enclosure. That's how you kind of borrow licks from others and then make it as your own. This is also a very diatonic way to play it, 2/5-2/5/1 progression, but it sounds already good enough. Yep. So if you want to play this lick in a 2/5/1 in F, that's possible. But you definitely don't have that much time to do it in this like two bars, and you're trying to play a 4 bars lick. If you're quick enough, it's also possible, but it takes practice. Okay, so one important thing to know is that once you learn a lick, you have to remember the structure of it. Also, trying to play it in all 12 different keys, because you never know when you need to use it. And if you can get the structure right, no, this is a minor triad, an enclosure like with a sharp and a flat, and the chromatic run up and down. Just a more logical explanation can help you to understand the lick more than just trying to listen to the sound and trying to somehow know to play it in certain key. So this is something to remember. Also for this, it's also the same thing. This is short lick. It's so catchy, so that everyone can play it mostly in all 12 keys. But not all the licks are like that. There are some crazy licks. Like all those crazy licks that you can do, they are not as obvious, but there's always a way that you can remember a lick. Okay. So here I put a little note for you to help you to find 9th, 11th, 13th. This is probably one of my biggest struggle in learning jazz stuff. I just can't get it quick enough to know my 9th, 11th, 13th. If you have time, if in your shower, you can, or you're running or you're swimming, just try to think of your 9th, 11th, and 13th. It won't take too long, but it's always a good practice to do it every single day so you can get a hang of it. These are all some quick way to remember them, not necessarily the 100% correct way, but this is definitely the one that worked for me, and it's also a very quick way to remember. I have two alternatives for here. Like 2 is the 9th, also the 9th made up minor triad, as in the Dorian mode. Okay, that's pretty much the material for our first workshop. I hope that's not too much, and we can just try to put it in a standard. And I'll just play through this on the grid of my street, and for the next workshop we can actually play this tune. And this is a lovely tune, so I'm gonna play a little bit of it so you can see how you come up with a solo based on a major sound. Okay. it's a very simple solo that you can play on a Green Dolphin Street based on the major sound and couple of dominant sound, and I feel guilty to add a little blues scale on at the end, but it's always nice to have a good surprise. So for the next workshop, we're kind of gonna focus more on the standard, on Green Dolphin Street, so that like people can understand a little bit of major 251, and this entire song pretty much has like major things going all over it. So it will be a nice tune to learn for our next workshop. And there's also the next workshop doesn't need any membership, so feel free to join us and make sure you learn your tune. No, just make sure you learn something from the workshop. It will be my pleasure if I can teach you like anything. If you have any questions now, you can just ask me, like in terms of the content of this workshop. Yep, this is a little question and answer time. Yep, I understand there's a little bit latencies for the stream, so I may not get your questions like immediately as you post them, but I think I'll work that out. If you have any suggestion that I can improve on the content, or if you like the lick, or if you want more licks you want like 3 licks for one workshop, that also works for me. Also for the solo that I just played, for the next workshop I'll have it written out so you can actually learn the logic of it, and then make it as your own solo. But definitely don't play the same stuff at a jam every time, because otherwise people will just sound the same. Anyway, if you have any questions now, you can just send it over on the chat. Yep, I am using iReal Pro, a very awesome app. There's tons of standards in it, and there's also a lot of like backing track app like from MDAC Music, but by far iReal Pro it's like my go-to options. Yeah. So if you don't have any questions, then there I got some little reminder. For example, the major practice. If you don't have time, you can just do it like 15 minutes of a day, and you'll get your major sound improve significantly, because that's how you can get familiarized with every single mode. Like even like for Aeolian, Locrian, you don't use them that often, or even you don't analyze in terms of those modes, you will still know that that's an Aeolian, that's a Locrian sound. Especially if you know your Lydian sound well enough, there's tons of things you can explore on your solo, also your dominant things. And for the next workshop, I'm also gonna explore more on this G7, this dominant 7 things, because this stuff is just too good. It's just too good. There are like Miles Davis in his like modal jazz, he used tons of mode things, but he never abandoned this G dominant, like the concept of using 5 chord all over the places. Just he never abandoned them. John Coltrane, Charlie Parker, like professionals, they're expert in using dominant stuff. And dominant stuff is not just like one single scale. It's a whole world. It's a like the jazz world. It's almost like made up of the jazz world. Yeah, the dominant things, melodic minor and diminished stuff. Yeah. So thank you very much for joining our first very workshop. If you find it a little bit boring, that's totally understandable, because this is my first time doing the workshop. And if there is anything that I can improve on, please definitely let me know in the chat, through the emails, through the Facebook page, our Instagram page. And thank you very much for joining us on today's workshop.